So just know that program interest typically is going to be something that you'll talk about, especially for NC State. So there will be questions that ask, why did you pick that specific major? And so just doing a lot of thinking before you start the application process on what that major is going to be and why you're really interested in it is a good idea, because you'll be asked to share that information. And then we also have SAT, ACT scores. So this is something else that varies by college. Some schools will require that you submit these scores. Others, like you're probably seeing a lot now, a lot of colleges are making that optional. So looking to see if that's a requirement is definitely a good way to go. And then finally, colleges look at your story. So your story is really where that essay can come into play. It goes a lot beyond just the different components of the application that you submit or your high school counselor submits. Your story through the essay is really your chance to kind of stand out and provide even more information to universities to give them an idea of who you are. And we'll talk a little more about what that story looks like, but that's just a general overview for now. So I want to hear from you all. We're going to go ahead and launch a poll now. So if you can go ahead and let me know, what do you think colleges want to see in your essays? There's going to be a few options on there. And if you don't see an option that you really relate to, feel free to post in the chat how or what you think colleges want to see in your essays. So a few options: my accomplishments, an obstacle, favorite memory, why you want to go to college. And again, if you're saying something else, feel free to put what that something else is in the chat. So I'm seeing versatility, they want to see who you are, individualism, your passions, personality, background. Awesome. Authenticity, very cool. And looking at the poll, it looks like a lot of people are saying obstacle and accomplishments. Awesome. Yeah, y'all have some really great responses here. So all in all, basically there's no specific thing that colleges are looking for. And that's kind of a point that we want to get across. There's no right or wrong essay. There's no right or wrong topic. So really it's going to be relative to you and your individual story. What is something that you feel is really important for colleges to hear about? A lot of times there are multiple essays on an application, so it gives you a chance to talk about both an accomplishment and an obstacle. So just depending on the applications you're completing and the schools you're applying to, you may have a chance to share about all of those different things. But thank y'all for participating. And so talking about what essays you'll actually be writing, this again will vary depending on the college, but typically if you're using the common application or coalition application, that general application, the personal essay is something that will be required. And there are various prompts that you can choose from. So typically the Common App does post their prompts the summer before the application even opens. So although you can't start applying to colleges until August, you can see what the essay questions are going to be earlier in the summer, which gives you an idea of kind of how you can start preparing. With the personal essay, there's typically going to be a word minimum and maximum. And so for the Common App, it's between 250 to 650 words. Tanya will go into detail about kind of where you want to stand in that range in a bit, but it's also good to keep in mind that there might be maximums and minimums for word limits, and take that into account when you are writing or choosing a topic. On the general application, there's also an optional question about COVID-19. So one thing that we really want to get across today is that behind colleges and the essays and applications, there are real people like myself, like Justin, Jackie, Jocelyn, Tanya, who are reading those applications. And we genuinely care about different challenges you've overcome, your health, your family's health, how different outside events have impacted your journey. And so we want to make sure that there is space on the application for you to be able to share if that's relevant to you. And so the COVID-19 optional essay, essentially, it just gives you a chance to share any obstacles you've encountered relative to the pandemic that have kind of impacted you either personally or academically. Because we recognize that it's not all separate boxes. You know, you have a personal life, you have an academic life, but they mesh and they overlap. And so if something's happened in your personal life, more than likely that's going to trickle into your academic life as well. And so we want to get to know you as a whole person. And that's why you'll see there's a lot of different opportunities for essays related to different topics. And then when we get into the NC State specific application, this will serve as an example. Each school may have their own required essays. They might have no essays required. They might have 4 really long essays that are specific to their school. So this will depend. But as an example, on NC State's application, there are 3 different essays that you can complete. 2 are required and 1's optional. And this is on top of the personal essay that's part of the Common App. So when we talk about program choice, because you have to pick a major when you're applying to NC State, we do ask you a question about that major. And basically the question is, why did you choose to study that major at NC State? And so when you're looking at that question and other questions, one thing that's really important to do is to make sure that you're answering the full question. So if you talk about, like, I have wanted to study education since I was a kid, I think it's super important, that's great. But thinking about it, you've only answered half of that question. The other half of that question is, but why at NC State? And so that's just a tip as you're looking at essay prompts to think about, make sure you're answering that full question. A lot of times when schools will ask that, speaking for NC State, what we want to hear is, what does NC State's education program offer that you're really excited about? So that might involve doing a little bit of research on the school. And that's something, again, that you can start early on. Diversity, so there is a required diversity related question for NC State's application and for some other schools. Diversity and inclusion are really important things at NC State that are very valuable. And so we do ask that all of our applicants talk a little bit about what diversity and inclusion means to you and how you're going to contribute to that inclusive environment at NC State. And then lastly, there is an optional obstacles essay, and that's a chance for you to share context with us on anything that you've encountered, whether in your personal life or academic life, that has impacted your journey to college. So again, that space where you can really share with us. I went through a really tough time my junior year, and for that reason, I had a grade that dropped, or I had trouble getting access to the internet during COVID-19. And because of that, I couldn't submit an assignment, so I got a C in a class. Those are little details that people like us read and understand. And so using those optional essays to really share that information is going to be really helpful as we get to know who you are as a person and really get more information behind the grades and the different pieces of information we're seeing on your transcripts. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to talk a little bit about why colleges ask for essays.
Yes, thank you so much, Kaylee. So yes, a question that we often hear from a lot of students is, why do colleges ask for essays, right? So colleges ask for essays because they want to learn more about you. So they want to know who you are, who you are as a person. So this is a great opportunity for us as admissions counselors as well to get to know you more as an individual rather than just grades, rather than just test scores, let's say number of service hours, because we're going to be able to see that. We're going to be able to see that on your application when you submit it. We're going to be able to see your transcript. But this is a great opportunity to hear from you. So your interests and unique experiences are also very, very important. Whether you are, let's say, the first in your family to attend college, whether you come from a low-income background, a lot of these experiences does allow us to help us better understand, why you're doing what you're doing, why you're applying for NC State, for example. So definitely feel free to mention these things or these experiences and unique experiences, I should say, in your essay. So now I also want to talk about, the do's and do not do's, basically what you shouldn't do when writing essays. So if Kaylee, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So obviously when it comes to writing essays, be yourself, okay? So it is okay to tell colleges who you are. So for these types of essays, you aren't required to write like a research essay or like a formal paper where you have to have like an intro, a body, a conclusion. This is a little bit more like, think of it more like a journal entry, okay? So you don't have to be citing literature, if that makes sense. So we've actually seen a lot of students who submit, for example, poems. Like we've literally seen people who submit poems or, want to, write like a little script, like a story. So again, be yourself. You don't have to have a formal essay when it comes to writing these papers, okay? Also, when choosing a topic, choose something that you haven't mentioned before, because on the application, like it was mentioned before, we're going to be able to see your accomplishments, any extracurriculars that you've been, involved with or anything like that. Make sure that you choose something that you haven't mentioned already. There's no right, no wrong topic to write about. The only thing is that, talk about your accomplishments that you have had, or maybe talk about any challenges that you have faced. So again, be yourself. Once you have chosen your topic or prompt, because as mentioned before, there's going to be different prompts that you can choose from. Make sure to be specific and do not go off topic, if that makes sense. So don't talk about like multiple things at the same time, because that kind of confuses the reader. So make sure to be specific. Also, have someone who proofreads your essay, okay? So you can have your English teacher, let's say a family member, a friend, or if your high school has a college advisor, for example, make sure to utilize those resources, just to make sure that you're not making any silly mistakes. From my personal experience, I actually got to proofread lots of essays during my time with the advising corps, and a lot of students actually found it very rewarding to receive a lot of this, feedback, especially for students who come from, who English isn't their first language, for example. For me, like English wasn't my first language. So, a lot of times it's challenging to, start these essays. So definitely utilize those resources. Another good way, before I forget, to avoid a lot of these like grammatical errors is utilizing Word document. Like literally, Word document can be your best friend. When you start writing essays, make sure that you started, like I said, on a Word document, because it will literally tell you if you misspelled a word or if you wrote a run-on sentence. So make sure to utilize that. Last but not least, start early, okay? It is very important that you don't procrastinate, okay? Don't leave your essay writing to the last minute. I've done it personally in the past, and yeah, it's not good. So definitely start early. It does allow you to, really reflect on what you want to talk about. And it gives you time to, come up with an outline. If you're a person like myself who has a little trouble, starting an essay. So definitely start early. All right, so if Kaylee, do you mind going to the next slide? Now we're going to talk about, basically things that you shouldn't do when writing essays. So being redundant, though, therefore, make sure that you're not repeating yourself. I kind of mentioned this before. Make sure that, there's something that you're talking about that hasn't been mentioned before. This is just a great opportunity for you to really express yourself. So, just talk about something that really is unique or something that we don't know about yourself. Also, when it comes to limiting yourself, for a lot of these essays, there's going to be a word count, kind of like what Kaylee was saying. So, especially like for the Common App, the coalition, I believe there's like a word count of 250 to 650 words or something like that. So make sure that when you're writing those essays, I should say, when you hit the minimum requirement, don't say, okay, I'm done. Like that's it. Just 250 words, that's it. No. Or vice versa. Let's say that you end up writing more than 650 words or trying to write a book. Okay. Try to avoid that. Okay. So just keep it concise. And of course, try to avoid stress. Sometimes it's really hard to not stress out, but a lot of times we can do something about it to avoid stress. So, as I mentioned before, starting early on those applications, not those applications and essays. Do not wait until the last minute. Please. And one thing that I also want to mention that wasn't mentioned on this slide is to be cautious when we're using essays. Because I know, sometimes you want to reuse essays for multiple schools. make sure that when you are submitting essays to a specific school, that it doesn't have another school's name, if that makes sense. We've had plenty of essays that we've read that says, oh, you know what, this is why I want to attend XYZ school, and it's not even NC State. So just make sure, just the rule of thumb, make sure that you are always cautious when we're using essays. So just to conclude this presentation, again, a friendly reminder is that, the essay portion is something that is really, really important and a great opportunity for you to stand out. Because like I said, we're going to be able to see those grades. We're going to be able to see any test scores that you, submit. But this is just a great way for us to get to know you as a better person. So if you are comfortable enough, share something that means a lot to you, in this essay. Let us get to know you a little bit better. But that's it for today. Thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Justin or Jackie or Jocelyn.
We're actually going to keep it with y'all to a little bit just to kind of go into any kind of questions. So of course, like everyone, like, the way we like to do either the sessions is make sure we address any kind of questions you all may have. And you recall that from the session yesterday, a lot of you all said you wanted to know more about the college essay. And this is kind of us introducing it at a surface level that can be applicable to mostly everyone and mostly every school. So we'll also let the ladies go through and answer some questions within the Q&A box. So Tanya, you kind of harped on the first one a little bit. Someone asked about, can you use the same essays and apply in different colleges? So the answer is yes, but just make sure you say the right school within it. Kaylee, I'm gonna pop into two questions for you. One is really quick, and the other one can get a little more detail. And that is, when is the best time to start the college applications and the essay? And is there any kind of easy topics that a student should avoid?
That's both good questions. As far as when to start the applications, typically applications will open up in August of your senior year. Like we said, though, the application topics, or what are they called? Like questions, open up the summer prior, so you can see kind of what's going to be on the application beforehand, but you won't actually be able to start until August. And then for the second question, any topics to avoid? I would say if there's something that you're passionate about writing about, but feel like it might be a gray area, ask someone who you trust at school. Ask a counselor, ask a teacher, is this topic appropriate? More often than not, there are not really any no-go topics. If it's something that's important to you that you feel is good for admissions counselors to know when they're reading your application, feel free to share about it. I did also see, okay, never mind, Justin answered it in the chat. Yeah, the common application, those questions do go to all the schools. So like Tanya said, when it comes to naming specific schools, do be careful with doing that in the Common App essay, since every single school on the Common App will receive that one.
Right, I'm going to jump in with our next question. So I did see a few questions regarding the program interest question on the application, and what do you do if you are interested in undecided or exploratory studies? So how do you answer that question if you aren't really sure what program you're interested in? So whoever wants to answer that.
I can answer that one. It's definitely a question we get a lot. If you're undecided, what in the world do you talk about when it comes to program interest? I would say be transparent. You can state in your essay that you're undecided and you want more time to explore different majors before choosing one. Something else I might suggest is doing a little research on the school's undecided program. So NC State's exploratory studies major has a lot of programming, a lot of advising, a lot of opportunities to work with the Career Development Center. And so including what you're most excited about with what that program offers is definitely a good way to go. Another way to think about it is undecided. It is a major choice in and of itself. So when it comes to reviewing applications for undecided, it's a competitive major still. It's still something that we look at the same way we look at all other majors. So still think about it as a major selection, and then talk about it as what do you want to get out of that program, just like you would any other specific major.
Awesome. Thank you. So our next question, let's see, I need to pick one. So this one is related to time management. And if you have any tips about like how to manage your time when it comes to writing an essay or other like schoolwork. So I don't know if maybe Tanya, you could talk a little bit about time management.
Yeah, so yeah, it all depends on the person as well, like their flexibility, their schedule. At least like from my prior experience, like as a previous college advisor and seeing my students, working on these essays, a lot of times it's hard to kind of like, schedule like a time where you focus primarily on this essays. That is what one recommendation that I would give. Really give yourself like a time, like, a time frame, like, an hour per day or per week or whenever you have availability to really kind of just, whether if it's writing or outlining, your essay. Because like I said, it can be a little hard, but just time management is like very important. I don't know, like if any of you also have any recommendations, just being able to, like I said, for me, at least what I've seen from students, just being able to really have like a gap time where they can just work on their essays, whether if it's outlining or actually writing. I don't know if Kaylee or any of you have any other suggestions that I might not be thinking of right now.
That's definitely what I would say too. What I do, because I'm also someone whose essays, man, they're not fun,
Yeah.
right? But usually I'll make a timeline like, okay, this week I'm going to sit down and brainstorm topics. Next week, I'm going to write an outline for the topic I pick. The week after that. So that might be a good way to do it too. Just set like small different goals for yourself. And if you start it soon enough, then make sure you give yourself time to finish before the application deadline. Give yourself time to have that person go through and proofread, get feedback, make edits, and then submit. So like Tanya said, set aside time in a day, in a week, but then also have like tangible goals that you can reach.
Yeah, I definitely think those are some really great tips and kind of what I was going to reiterate. I like to just make little goals too, where I think it can be really overwhelming when you have like a whole essay and you're like, okay, this is my word count. And it's like really overwhelming to think about like, well, I have to write a whole essay. So I like to break it up and be like, okay, I'm going to start with my introduction. And then once I finish that, then I'll like move on to the next part or like the next topic that I want to talk about. So just kind of breaking it up and thinking about small portions rather than the essay as a whole can make it a little bit less overwhelming, at least for me. So you can always just find what's best for you. But on to our next question. This person said, the hardest part for writing essays for me personally has always been making sure I do not go over the maximum. So how do you suggest solving that? It's a really good question.
We are the same person. I am the person when I have someone edit, I'm like, all right, here's my paper. You have to edit it and you have to cut half of it. So I totally understand you. Some of the things that I've learned over the years to kind of help with that is, I know Tanya talked about like trying not to be redundant. A lot of times I'll notice that I say things differently, but really it comes down to it's the same thing that I'm saying, just saying it differently. And so being concise and then having someone really go through and cut. So it can be really helpful to have a second pair of eyes on your paper in those situations. And if there's like 5 sentences and you're like getting to the same point, maybe you can condense that into 1 sentence. So I know that's a little bit broad in terms of advice, but definitely having someone proofread. And if you give them the intent, like, hey, go through and help me be more concise, that can be helpful.
Awesome, thank you. So next question, I'm going to throw it over to Tanya. I lost my question. Oh, okay. This is about optional questions. So like, do you recommend that a student still answer optional questions? So like some of our optional short answer questions. And does that lower your chances of getting into a school if you don't answer an optional question?
Yeah, so it definitely doesn't lower your chances of, attending a school if you decide not to, answer that question. That is why it's optional, if that makes sense. It doesn't hurt you if you do decide to write, choose to answer those optional questions. I guess it all depends on the student as well. it's up to them at the end of the day. We can say, well, you should or you shouldn't, but it's up to the student. But yes, just to clarify, like, you won't be at a disadvantage if you decide to not answer those, optional questions. But, if you do have something to talk about in regards to that prompt or question, definitely take advantage of it. It does not hurt you.
Thank you. So this next question, I'm going to kind of tie two questions together. So they're asking, what do admissions counselors look for in an essay? And then also kind of like, how do you feel about sob stories? And are those redundant? And can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, just maybe things that you could steer away from or maybe talk about, or how we look at certain things within an essay? So I'll throw that to Kaylee.
So in terms of what do admissions counselors look for in an essay, I would say it's really broad. There's nothing specific that we're looking for. It's really if there's a story or experience that's important to you that you want to share and you feel like it really gives us a look into who you are, that's what we want to hear. So there's nothing that I can specifically tell you, like, we want to hear you talk about this topic or this activity or this experience, because it's going to depend on the person. And so I would say what we're looking for is authenticity and for you to be genuine in the information that you're sharing. I know personally, when I was applying to colleges, I had a teacher who was like, hey, you should write about art. And I have nothing against art, but I wasn't super passionate about it. But I was like, all right, I'll write an essay about art. And I remember finishing that essay and I was like, why did I write about art? And so write about something you're passionate about, no matter what that is. There's nothing specific we're looking for other than for you to be like genuine in what you're sharing. And then as far as sob stories go, if there's an experience that's really impacted you that you want to share with us, that's not going to be looked at negatively whatsoever. So we are super open to hearing student stories, and I would say there's nothing bad about sharing an experience that's negative. If that's something that you want us to know about or you're comfortable sharing and feel really adds to that experience. So I hope that answered the question. But all in all, like, negative stories are not necessarily bad stories, because we recognize not everyone has just all positive experiences. So.
Awesome, thank you. So this next question is going to be, let's see. Okay, what are some examples of impressive application essays that you've gotten? So maybe both of you could answer this, just maybe something that was memorable that you read within an application essay. It's kind of hard to think about.
Yeah, it's hard to think because, you read so many applications, and just to kind of pinpoint one. Let's see.
Maybe this is something that all of us could jump in, because I mean, we all read applications and have spent a number of years doing so. Justin, who are you pointing to?
I wanted you to go first.
Look, when it comes to when I think of back on like college application essays, there's always one specific one that stands out to me, and it's about chickens. Because this student was like telling us a story about how she was like randomly at an FFA like fair one day, and she was like all of a sudden she ran into somebody who like shoved a clipboard in her face and was like, here, you have to like grade these chickens because they had like this contest. So she was like grading them based on like the color, because she had no idea what she was doing. She was doing it based on like the color and stuff, and the chicken that she chose, or like she ended up choosing as the winner, like ended up actually winning the competition. So she was like, that was a weird coincidence, but it was a random moment that happened in my life. So like it can be as something as like a small moment in your life, or it can be as big as like something that, sticks out to you about your life. It can be about your passions and your interests. So that chicken story always like stands out to me. And I know because my coworker like also read that essay at one point in time. She was like, yeah, it stood out to me a lot because it was just very memorable. Yeah.
I thought you were referring to my Hasbro with chickens comment, and I was like, Nothing.
Wait.
It was, an essay. It was a chicken essay I read before. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. For me, would probably be, this is basic. It's a lot of them I remember, but you try to tell me this whole story about it. I'm like, heck no, I can't recall it in a story way. But it was this kiddo. He talked about he loved deep sea fish diving, something like that, like diving basically in general into the ocean. And he compared it to going to college, like diving down. It's like a new world, a new atmosphere, breaking free of his like hometown rural community and coming to a city in a sense. And try something new. So I thought that was super, super cool, really dope and interesting because it tied in his passion, something he was cool for. It actually tied into his major a little bit and talked about why he wanted to go to college. So it kind of blended them all together, which I always like, really cool. Really, I enjoyed it overall.
I can't think of a specific story that stands out, but sort of like Justin said, a theme that I like a lot is if there's like an obstacle that students have overcome. What I like to hear about is like the growth that students have experienced and like the self-reflection that they've done. Because I think that's definitely something that students learn a lot more about how to do in college, but just like sharing your story, but then like Justin said, being able to relate that to what future experiences might look like and how that growth can apply to all different kinds of situations is personally something I like reading about.
Yeah, and I would say that I really like, if we're gonna go with themes, maybe I really like family stories. Like you could always talk to people in your family like that they have, they have stories. Like I think one that's pretty memorable to me is like a student was talking about their grandma's like immigration story and stuff. So I think, just talk to the people in your life. They have stories. So you could always just, that kind of influences the person that you become too. And so I think that those are really cool to read. And maybe one helpful tip, I don't know. So we're going to move on to the next question. Let's see. Okay. Hold on. Sorry, I lost my question. Okay, can y'all talk a little bit about what is a personal statement, and is that different than just the Common App essays? So maybe Kaylee, you could answer this.
So if it's part of the common application, the essay prompts that you get to choose from, it's called the personal statement. And so there may be other schools that still require a separate personal statement that's for their specific institution. So it just varies by school, but on the common application, the 5 or 6 prompts you get to choose from, the essay that you write based on the prompt is called a personal statement too.
Awesome, thank you. So next question is going to be about the formatting requirements for an essay. And are there minimum word counts or maximum word counts? And what if someone is right at the minimum? Is that bad? Is that good? So maybe Tanya, you could talk about this.
Yeah, so at least for the Common App, there is a word requirement, or I guess a word count. I believe the minimum is 250 and I think the maximum is 650. So, as I mentioned before, just how can I say it? Let's say that you make it to the 250 word limit, or I guess word minimum, don't just automatically say, okay, I'm done, that's it. If you genuine, answer the question and answer the question that it's asking you, it's fine. We've had, students who submit essays that are, 250 words, a little bit over 250. So, you won't be, I guess, penalized in a way. So it's okay. But as long as you answer the question, if that makes sense, as long as you, are thorough on that essay portion. But yeah, that would be something that I would, definitely kind of make sure that you think about that as well. And of course, if you do write more than 650 words, make sure that you cut it through, have someone to proofread it, help you make it more concise, because I believe the Common App won't even let you type more than 650 words, if I'm not mistaken. So making sure that you're able to, you basically fulfill that word requirement.
Awesome, thank you. So we are getting a lot of kind of just general admissions questions that I'll jump to in a little bit, but I want to kind of address some of these essay questions first. So there is a really interesting question about if a student can submit a video essay rather than just a traditional essay. So Kaylee, could you talk about that?
That's a good question. For NC State, we don't accept videos. It does have to be an essay that's written to submit the application, but I can't speak for all schools. So I would recommend, if that's something that you want to do, that's a neat idea, but definitely reach out to the schools you're applying to first to make sure that that's something that they would accept.
Thank you. All right, so the next question is for Tanya. So how big of a factor does the essay play into a student's application? So if a student has good grades, good test scores, service hours, but their essays aren't as good, how does that affect their application and their admissions?
Yeah, so at least here at NC State, and I know a lot of schools kind of have that same format, I should say, we do take a very holistic approach. So we won't necessarily just focus just on your essay, if that makes sense. Like, we're going to look at everything. So we're going to look at your grades, your test scores, if you provide any, of course, your extracurriculars, your interest in the program, and of course the essay. So I guess your essay is not very heavy on your application, if that makes sense, because we look at every single thing. So, it is important, but at the same time, I don't want you to stress all over it because your essay is not perfect. Like, no essay is perfect. Like, it's perfectly fine. Like, we've had essays that have, silly mistakes, and that's totally okay. That doesn't, put you at disadvantage. So yeah, I wouldn't really stress so much like it has to be perfect. Like, it's okay because we look at everything.
Thanks. So next question is pretty interesting. So this one asks, would an admissions counselor think that a struggle we went through wasn't actually that bad? So I'm worried that the obstacle that I wrote about wasn't so bad in the end. So could you, maybe Kaylee, could you talk about how we look at obstacles and if that would be even something that comes across an admissions counselor's mind?
No. So your experience is your experience. I don't think, speaking for anyone on this call, we would ever imagine to put ourselves in your shoes and think that we know your experience for ourselves. So what you write about, we look at objectively, if that makes sense, or as objectively as possible. So with all pieces of an application, we're trusting the information that you put on there. So your experience is your experience. It's not something that we're here to judge. Or try to put on a scale of like bad experience, not so bad. So definitely just know that when we're reading applications and essays, it's not something where we're out there to judge or, make our own opinions. It's really reading the information you put out there and trusting everything that you provide. But that's a really good question.
Awesome, thank you. So next question for Tanya. Can we go ahead and make an account on Common App so we can look at the essays, or do they have to wait till August?
Yeah, that is a great question, especially for our rising seniors who are in this call. So you can literally, like I said, you can just Google Common App essay prompts. Like, it will show you what prompts are available. And I wouldn't really say that you should start an application, or I guess I should say I guess you could create an account, but as long as you don't start an application, because the application isn't open yet, if that makes sense. The application will open in August. So during that time, you'll be able to actually fill out all the information, basically like your essays, basically everything that makes an application complete. So I guess technically you could create an account, but as long as you just don't start an application, if that makes sense, just wait until it opens, which would be in August. But yeah, just go ahead and Google those questions, go ahead and kind of start brainstorming. That will definitely help you with that process.
Thanks. Okay, so next question is going to be for everyone. So this person wants to know, what did each of you write for your essay, if you remember? So if everyone wants to answer this.
Oh my.
First of all, Y'all should know y'all's before mine. I'm like the oldest person. Y'all should know y'all's before mine. But mine was essay I honestly reused and just did a bunch of edits to. And when I got to ninth grade, our English teacher made us write an essay about transitioning from middle school to high school. And I took that same essay and changed it around to talk about transitioning from high school to college. It was a lot of edits. I probably should just restart it from scratch, but I kept that same idea, talked about just the transition process and how I was looking forward to it and kind of new step I'm taking, but also some of the worries I had as well, and some of the transitions I know I had to go through.
I think during the time when I applied to college, there was a question. I think they got rid of it. There was a question, something like, "Why do you do what you do?" or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the question or the prompt was, but I do remember talking about like basically everything that I do it for my family. Like something about family, kind of like what Jocelyn was saying earlier. Like family for me is very important, and coming from like a low income background, coming from like immigrant parents who migrated here back in when they were like only 16, 17 years old, and wanting to make basically an impact in my family, to show them that it is possible to basically have that American dream, going to college and everything. I know I talked something about that. I don't remember, like I said, I think it was something like, "Why do you do what you do?" or something like that. But I basically focus a lot on like my family and like the importance of me, like, showing that, I'm doing this for myself, of course, but also for them. So something along those routes, something like that. But I think that's what I wrote.
I remember that one of the questions when I was applying to college was, "What is your comfort food?" And I wrote about Lay's potato chips with salsa Valentina on top. And I wrote about how that like brought so much comfort to me, and I tied it into like cultural identity, and how like, I don't know, coming home from school and like plopping on the couch and like watching my novelas after like I came home, and like I would be eating that. It was like a sense of like coming back home to like this safe space, and like I don't remember. This was a couple years ago. Almost 10. Whew, that I just aged myself. But I really did tie it to like just that cultural identity, because like we were saying yesterday when we were answering that question of like what was it like to be a person of color at like a predominantly white institution, and how Jocelyn and myself like mentioned having those experiences since high school, and so this was kind of like an escape and brought like this sense of comfort and like this safe sort of zone. So I wrote about all of that, and kind of stemming from this one like snack. So I remember that very clearly. So kind of an example, like y'all, like you can truly write about anything, everything.
Perfect, thanks. I think I guess I could answer this question too. I honestly don't really remember, except for that I wrote about this like I think I wrote about wanting to go to Brazil, and I don't really remember what all I included in that, but I think there are just like, I think the prompt must have been something about like, what's a place that you wanted to go to and like why. And so, yeah, I just remember talking about Brazil. And I think looking back on that, I'm like, I probably should not have written about that. Like there probably were a million other things I could have written about, but at the time, that's what I wanted to do. So, and it worked out. I got into college. So all right, so we're getting a lot of questions that are kind of just like admissions related. So we can try to go through those quickly and then maybe bring it back to the essay questions. But let's see, there was a question that I saw about gap year. So Kaylee, could you talk about what a gap year would be, and how does someone take a gap year, and if that affects an application at all, or like their admissions decision?
That's a really good question. And so when I hear gap year, there are two different possibilities. So some students will choose to take a gap year before even applying to college. other students may apply to college, get accepted, and then take a gap year. So that's a distinction that's good for everyone to hear. Oh, that was thunder. I don't know if y'all could hear that. So anyways, if you're wanting to attend an institution and then take a year off for whatever reason, typically other than taking classes, there is an option if you're accepted to a university to request to delay your start term. And so that's called a gap year oftentimes. So that's an option if you want to have your admission and then start later. Otherwise, some students may take a year off after graduating high school before applying to college. So I would say that's definitely an option. A lot of like admissions will just depend on like if you're taking any college classes during that time, that could change how you apply to schools, whether that's as a freshman or transfer. So in terms of how schools look at gap terms before you apply, I would say it kind of depends on what you're doing during that time. If you're choosing to work to save up money for college, that's definitely something I'd recommend you share on your application or in your essays. That way the admissions counselor has an idea of what you were doing during that time. Some students may do like mission trips or study abroad or go somewhere to visit family during that time. So regardless of what the circumstances are, just making sure you share what you were doing during that time is always a good idea. But I would say depending on like what you're doing, if it's one of the things I mentioned, it typically doesn't negatively impact your admission.
Thank you, Kaylee. So we have time for just one more question, and I'll still do one of the non-essay questions just to finish us out. So this question is going to be for you, Tanya, about if a student comes in as undecided and then they end up choosing a major, how does that process work? Like if they want to eventually switch into a major?
Yeah, well, at least, I mean, I'm going to talk about from here at NC State because every school is different. So at least at NC State, you know, you can come in as undecided. So basically looking into our exploratory studies program. So after that year or two, it depends on, you know, how long it takes you to decide what major you want to do. If I'm not mistaken, you would just have to go through a process called the change of degree application CODA process. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, like, you know, choosing what program you might be interested in. So maybe if you want to go into like, you know, biology or psychology, whatever it is, you would just have to go through that process. And, you know, you would basically initiate or start that program that following semester or year. Pretty simple. I know every institution is different, at least like from my experience, like going to UNC, you know, just talking to your academic advisor as well. You know, a lot of times, you know, talking to those advisors, they are able to really help you out, like facilitate in choosing like what major might be most fit for you. So yeah, so every school is a little bit different, but it's pretty simple way to change majors.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for presenting for us today and for answering all of those questions. And thank you all for your questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Justin to close us out for today.
Perfect. And we did our best to answer as many questions in the Q&A. Some of you all we answered privately. So keep an eye within the chat box. It should pop up within you for that. We made it to day 2, y'all. Thank you so much for participating with us and being engaging with our first round of guest speakers. We have plenty more to come, but we do appreciate it. Before we close everything out, I see someone's already done it already, but can we give a big thank you in the chat box for Kaylee and Tanya for spending some time with us. It's amazing because we get to work with these ladies anyway, and it's great to kind of hear them come in and participate and speak with you all just a little bit. I'll say as far as things we do here in the office, a lot of people want to figure out, can they interact with our pre-college programs or talk to our group of students? And it's kind of fun. We get to be selective. So we thought Kaylee and Tanya would be awesome to share this information with you all. So I've seen the thank yous come out. Thank you so much for that, everyone. For tomorrow, we do have another round of guest speakers. We have a speaker coming in for the first session. And for the second session, we'll have 2 of our students, current students here on campus, join to do a presentation to talk a little bit about it, their time here on campus life at NC State and on the college campus. So a lot of the questions you all had about housing, things around there, they're going to be the perfect two people to talk a little bit about that and their experience being on campus for also. Next thing before we close real quickly, I'm going to go ahead and ask Jocelyn to drop the evaluation link down in the chat box. Just please make sure you do get it if you can. But the evaluation just gives some checkpoints and make sure everyone's on the same track. And we hit some points, we'll make sure you all get across. Big shout out to everyone who was able to answer them questions for us yesterday. Most of y'all had completed tools within the first 5 minutes, so we do greatly appreciate it. It brings us joy. So Jocelyn dropped in a couple more times right before 3:15. But make sure if you can click on that Google Links form. It's about 3 questions, I think, maybe 4. Super simple, super fast. But make sure we're going through with it. Make sure we get everything going forward really quick. Hold on. So someone said really quick, does NC State require a personal statement? Yes, that's a big essay through Common App. And then again, you have the ones like program choice, diversity, and obstacles is optional for it. But yeah, thank you all so much. We'll hang out for this last 2 minutes real quickly. We'll keep dropping the evaluation link to make sure you get it. And if you all have any questions or you want to talk to each other in the chat box at this time, go ahead and do so. We don't have to have any worries about freezing. You'll see we kind of jump in every now and then and have a little fun with it as well. But if not, you all are good to go. Remember, at 11 o'clock, we'll see the Zoom link for tomorrow. If you have any issues, please email us before 1 o'clock. If you don't get it by 12:30, go ahead and shoot one of us the email. It'd be a whole lot easier for us before the session start. We can make sure you get the Zoom information. But yeah, if you can, email us before 1 o'clock. We make sure you're good to go. But make sure you're on it. But you all are free to go. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.